Well, ITAL was my first business, and that was the one my brother and I set up because we were unemployed. So we were really looking for income, which we did not succeed at getting for quite some time, actually. It turns out you have to build the business before you get the income. So that was sort of my first learning, as you put it. What did we learn from ITAL? I learned how to do business, right? Because we were basically buying and selling computer kit. We were fast and loose traders on the street in LA, and grew the business over a number of years, but never really with an eye to building a lasting business. We were always, unfortunately, looking for the quick buck, and so we remained traders more than building a lasting business. Having said that, if nothing else, it taught me that there's nothing wrong with being deeply opportunistic. If you move people talk about being agile. Agile is a metaphor, right? It's not real. A company is not agile. People move and think quickly and act quickly. Essentially, that's opportunism. An opportunity arises, you move quickly enough to take advantage of it. But the word opportunism sounds bad. The word agile somehow sounds good. Okay, so what's the difference? Well, the difference is you're just painting the same thing in another color, right? And there is a lot to be said for being opportunistic. Having said that, I find over and over again that people who've not run real businesses, who've not had to make payroll, who've not had to wake up with an inadequacy of capital, i.e. investors, frequently preach focus, and they preach discipline, and they preach focusing solely on the intended outcome. I think it's a grave mistake. A longitudinal study was done a few years ago in the US looking at companies that had, over a period of 20 or 30 years, grown to be very, very large, Fortune 500. And they tracked back to their earliest days and tried to understand what was it about them that would then eventually, did they have attributes in common? And one of the attributes they almost uniformly had in common was the lack of a clear business purpose. So it was in all businesses that grew organically, that followed the money, that tended to grow as opportunities presented themselves without worrying too much about the specific strategy at hand. Now, of course, this runs contrary to everything that people preach, and yet my first business and many of my other businesses have grown on the back of Plan B or Plan C or Plan X. So I think I learned that starting at ITAL and moving on. If you want to have a happy relationship with your brother, or my brother, as the case may be, then you really should be his business partner. So I learned that, so I've never again gone into business with a family member. What else did I wish I'd known? I wish I had known that I was sitting on top of a gold mine and that I did not understand how to take advantage of that gold mine. In other words, we started a business and we were essentially selling computers. But we basically would trade in almost any element of computer kit. So we traded in processors and math coprocessors and memory, and we had the basis for actually quite a cool business that could have grown. But we had no idea that that's what we had. And so the flip side of being that it's okay to be opportunistic is you also have to know a great thing when it comes along and then grab it and stop doing everything else and then run with it. And so if you don't have the ability to spot the large business in what you're doing, then being opportunistic means you will always merely be trading like we were. And ultimately, the business didn't grow into a large business. We sold it as a modest business to somebody else for a modest sum. And my brother went north and I stayed south because we remained brothers instead of business partners. Somebody once said the money's in the exhaust. And it has proved to be over and over again the case that I'll be focusing on this thing when all people want is that thing from the same body of product. And of course, if you're really bullheaded, you just go yell at the customers and tell them they're wrong, which I've seen entrepreneurs do, firing the customer. It's a very, very short-sighted approach. But in large part, it's because you don't know what they value. The problem with many people who are innovators, inventors in particular, is they tend to focus on the innovation when, in large part, innovations in fact aren't invented, they're discovered. Just as pricing isn't invented, it's discovered. A price for a product is essentially what somebody else in the marketplace decides its value is. And that decision establishes the price. Your telling them what the price is doesn't establish it. That establishes your desire for a price. And frequently what it establishes is how much you have to make in order to be a profitable business. If what you have to make to be a profitable business is higher than what they choose as the price, you have an unsustainable business. Full stop. It's interesting because it seems very obvious, doesn't it? But a price is discovered. And yet how many people sit down and ask the question, what shall we do? How much shall we charge for this? As though they have a choice. You should never ask the question. You should always be asking yourself, who can I go out and look at and understand to determine what price I'm going to get for this? All businesses fall into one of two camps. They either undercharge or overcharge. But there's no point in time where you charge the right amount. Because people either buy very quickly knowing that you've left money on the table, or you'll find that it's really a push to get that out the door because you're charging too much for it. There's a band and you're never on the money. Having said that, small businesses suffer from insecurity, quite rightly. If you have to make payroll, you'd rather make enough to make payroll than not make payroll. It's like somebody said, what's it like, how does it feel being 50? I said, compared to what? Not being 50? It feels great.